Imagine waking up to the sound of artillery in the distance, your clothes damp with mud, your only meal a crust of stale bread. This was daily life for millions, and yet we know so little about them. No statues, no grand memorials, just forgotten faces in old photographs. But one letter, one diary can change that. What did this soldier see? What did he fear? And how did he endure? Tonight, you'll hear his words, unedited, unromanticized, because history isn't just made by kings and generals. It's made by men like him. The first light of day doesn't wake you gently. There's no warm sunrise creeping across your blanket. There's no blanket at all. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's in your chest, behind your eyes, inside your bones. You've been shivering for so long, it feels normal now. Your clothes never dry. Not the wool, not the socks, not the boots that feel more like buckets strapped to your feet. You shift your weight and realize the ground beneath you isn't firm. It gives, sloppy and thick, like it resents your presence. You slept on a scrap of burlap laid across planks that are already sinking into the mud. It doesn't matter. You'd have slept on the trench wall itself if it meant one less hour awake. Your body aches from curling in on itself. Every seam of your tunic feels heavy and swollen with water. It smells like wet sheep mixed with ash. The collar rubs raw against your neck, chafed by wool that refuses to soften no matter how many days you've been sweating into it. Your skin is tender, rubbed down to a thin burn where fabric should protect you. But it's not the rubbing that threatens you most. It's the dampness. Cold water is the enemy here, not gunfire. You've felt your toes go numb before. They tingle, sometimes stab with sharp needles of discomfort. You know enough now to check. That's the first job of every morning. Looking at what pieces of yourself still work. It's strange, isn't it? The morning ritual back home might mean splashing water on your face or throwing another log on the fire. Here, it's unlacing boots that don't want to come off. Your fingers fight stiff leather swollen with rain. You peel the wool sock from your foot slowly, like tearing paper apart, hoping skin doesn't come too. You hold your foot close to your face, studying it in the gray light that slides vaguely across the trench. There is no sunrise, just fog, smoke, and a kind of sickly white glow that doesn't warm you at all. It shows you enough detail to see if your skin is cracking, if it's turning pale, if it's starting to rot. You press on it, waiting for color to return. If it doesn't, then you know the trench is eating you alive. This is the reality that medical reports tried to capture with numbers. Thousands of men pulled from the front, not from bullets, not from shells, but from the slow destruction of their own feet. The term sounds almost laughable, trench foot. It makes it sound like a nuisance, some blisters or swelling you could walk off. But men lost toes, they lost whole feet. Infections crawled up legs and spread to bloodstreams. It took them out of the war in pieces before any enemy ever did. And everyone here knows it. That's why you start the day not searching for food, not preparing your weapon, but checking if you're rotting away in your own boots. You finish the inspection, slide your foot back into its filthy sock, and swallow the thought that someday it might not wake back up with you. You lace on the boot again, too tight, too wet, not really a shield at all. Your hands are numb from the cold now too, but at least they still work. for now. Around you, others are stirring, muttering, stamping their legs, groaning. Somewhere, water drips steadily into the trench like a clock running backward. Nothing about this routine surprises you anymore. It's just the start of another day. And then, before you can think too much about it, the first sound comes. Not birdsong, not voices. The first sound of the day is the thud of shells in the distance. Breakfast is too kind of a word for what you're handed. What lands in your lap is something that only pretends to be food. A lump of bread so dense it could double as a brick. A tin mug of brown liquid that calls itself tea, and on the rarest mornings, if supply lines didn't collapse or if luck tilted your way, the scrape of jam so thin it vanishes before you even taste it. This is the menu, and you chew not because it's satisfying, but because it's there. The bread doesn't bend when you try to tear it. You have to use your teeth like tools, sawing slowly through the crust until the inside finally cracks. The taste? Sour, sometimes earthy, sometimes sharp, with a flavor that tells you mold has already moved in. You look at the edges, but you eat them anyway, because what else are you going to do? The tea isn't much help either. The water it's made from probably sat in a crater not long ago, a pool where rain mixed with soil, rusted metal, and whatever else found its way in. Heated just enough to take the chill off, it leaves an aftertaste like blood on your tongue. You sip, grimace, swallow, and keep going. Complaining won't change it. Hunger will make you grab that mug again, whether you want to or not. It goes down hot, and maybe that heat will stick with you for an hour before the cold trench air drags it out again. You don't eat slowly. You can't. Every crumb you drop belongs to someone with whiskers and sharp teeth, waiting in the shadows. You watch the edge of the trench as you chew, because you know what's coming. Rats are bold. They scatter across boots and legs as if soldiers are just pieces of furniture. They leap at bread if you stall, dragging it straight out of your hand. You push them off, curse them, maybe slam one with the heel of your fist if you catch it in time. It doesn't matter. For everyone you shove away, another 10 are waiting, eyes glowing, teeth working. That's why you eat fast, not because you crave the food, but because leaving it out in the open is like setting up a feast for vermin. And still, even when you win the battle and manage to swallow it all, something gnaws at you louder than the rats. The food doesn't fill you. Most days you're lucky if half of it even makes it to your stomach without being ruined. Spoilage spreads through the supply crates quicker than anyone can control. Meat cans swell and burst with rot. Bread grows green before it's even off the wagon. And every so often, the tea tastes more like stagnant sludge than drink. What reaches you is what survived the journey, which means what's on your plate is as much about chance as ration lists. When you finish, you're still hungry. You always are. The real relief doesn't come from the meal. It comes from the smoke curling out of your lungs afterward. You light a cigarette with clumsy hands. Let the taste coat your tongue, and for a moment, it dulls the edges of the hunger twisting in your gut. The cigarette is the true breakfast here. Not the bread, not the tea, just smoke
filling the space food can't reach. You sigh, flick the ash into the mud, and know that's as close as you'll get to comfort. The meal ends, but the emptiness stays. And now, with your stomach unsatisfied and your hands stained with tobacco, all you can do is wait.
You're not alone down here. Forget the men beside you, the ones coughing into their sleeves or muttering under their breath. The real company is smaller, hairier, and somehow more confident than the soldiers themselves. The trench is crawling with rats, and they don't act like pests. They act like landlords. They don't scatter when you stomp or shout. They just sit there on the planks, whiskers twitching, bold and fat from weeks of free banquets. Some of them are the size of a house cat, so swollen with stolen food they look smug, like oversized shadows darting over your boots. You catch them staring, unblinking, and you try to look away before their eyes slide back into the dark corners you'd rather not think about. At first you guard your bread. You hold it close like it's worth something, like there's a fight to win. But you can't eat while staring into the dark every second, waiting for the sudden leap of fur onto your plate. They don't just wait for crumbs you drop. They take it straight from your hands, claws digging into your knuckles as they tear through the crust before you can lift another bite. And when they aren't stealing food, they're crawling over you in your sleep, nudging against your arms, scuttling across your legs as if you're nothing more than another plank to cross. Sometimes you wake to the sharp shock of a tail whipping against your face, and you don't know what you hate more, the rat or the fact that you already expect it. The worst is what they do to the bodies. You pretend you don't see. You keep your eyes forward, but you know. They gnaw on the dead like it's nothing. Low sounds of chewing mixing with the constant drip of mud and water. You see the teeth flash in lantern light, sharp little wedges cutting through fabric, skin, anything they can reach. The stench already makes your stomach tighten. But when you watch those paws digging into the chest of a man you used to know, you learn a different level of disgust. You swing your shovel, your boot, anything in reach, but the impact doesn't matter. One is gone, another waits. For every one you crush under a desperate blow, 10 come back, fatter, bolder, louder. You see the damage they leave behind too. Straps chewed through, knapsacks shredded, boots with soles gnawed open like fruit rinds. Nothing escapes them, not canvas, not leather. You stuff your gear under planks or even under your own body, but it makes no difference. The rats always find it. Some men curse them with each meal, others just shake their heads, resigned to the idea the rats will outlive them all. And the longer you stay, the more you understand that resignation yourself. What felt intolerable in the first days grows into background noise, a second soundtrack mixed with the artillery and the rain. The squeaks that once snapped your nerves now blur into the mud and smoke, another rhythm you stop registering. You even catch yourself glancing down, watching them dart along the trench floor and feeling nothing. Not fear, not anger, just acceptance. You stop lying to yourself. These aren't visitors. They belong here. They thrive on war, fattening themselves while men starve. If any living thing has truly claimed this trench, it's them. And just when you think you've adjusted, when you think you've hardened against it, you scratch at your collar and remember, the rats aren't the only creatures feeding on you down here, because next come the lice. You think you know discomfort until the itching sets in. It's not just your head or your neck, it's everywhere. Waistband, cuffs, seams, even places you shouldn't have to mention out loud. The itch sits under your skin, a steady burn that doesn't quit. No matter how many times your fingers drag across it, you scratch until your knuckles are raw. But all it does is shift the torment for a few seconds before it comes back sharper. You can rub your arms, dig nails into your chest, claw at your scalp, but the relief is fake. It always ends the same way, with welts and sores that sting worse than the itch itself. You learn fast that scratching solves nothing. What it really does is make the bleeding start. Little trails down your skin, eaten open through cloth that hasn't been washed in weeks. Once the sores crack, every bit of mud, every drop of filth you touch gets inside them. Then the burning isn't just itchy. Now it's angry and swollen, and you stare at the patchwork of your own skin, wondering what you look like underneath all the wool and grime. A soldier's uniform may have been cut for the king's army, but after a few weeks down here, it feels like a crawling prison that carries the enemy inside with you. The word delousing sounds almost official, like someone high up thought they'd solved it. The ritual goes like this. Strip down, hold your shirt tight, and run a candle flame along every seam until you hear the tiny pops as bugs cook alive. You cheer a little in your head when that sound cracks across the fabric. But then you put the clothes back on, and within an hour the itching is back. Why? Because the eggs survive. They're glued to the threads, stuck in folds too small to burn away. You torch 100 of them, and 1,000 more crawl back up your collar by morning. So you pretend the ritual works, because it makes you feel like you're fighting, even though you know the opposite is true.
And the cost isn't just the surface pain. The lice carry more than their bites.
They spread fever, the deep kind that drills into bone and leaves you shaking under your wool blanket at midday. Men collapse from it. Men with no bullet wounds, no shrapnel, no injuries anyone can see. Just a burning fever that creeps in unnoticed and then drops them flat. You watch one man lean on his rifle, teeth chattering, sweating through a chill so violent his helmet rattled. A month later he was gone, buried in the same uniform that carried the insects that killed him. You understand then that in this place, your uniform isn't armor. It's a breeding ground. There is only one time the lice let you breathe, and it's when the air turns bitter cold and the ground crunches instead of squelches. The sudden freeze slams their little bodies into dormancy. They don't vanish, of course, but they quiet down, slow, stop biting for a while. In the coldest hours, the itch fades, almost tricking you into thinking the nightmare has ended. Then the thaw comes, and they come alive again, hungrier than before. You can fight rats with boots and shovels. You can duck shells. You can dodge bullets, but there is no escape from the lice. They follow you everywhere, settle into every fold, every scar, every pocket of sweat. They are the one enemy no soldier ever beats. And while you scratch until the sores weep, you realize the trench has another enemy waiting, the stench that never leaves.
The guns never really stop. They pound through the day, through the night, through every shallow moment of rest you pretend is sleep. The air seems stitched together by explosions, loud and constant enough that you almost forget life without them. And then, for no reason you can trace, the sound falls away. The world doesn't fade slowly or ease into quiet. It stops like someone cut the cord. 1 second, the trench is shaking with thunder. The next, it's empty. The quiet folds in, heavy, thick, unnatural. You're left with the ringing in your own ears and the uneasy twist in your stomach that tells you something is wrong. Because silence isn't peace. It's warning. You freeze when it hits, not because you want to, but because silence makes every motion feel dangerous. Even the scrape of your sleeve against your bayonet feels too loud. You glance around, and everyone else is the same. A half-finished cough gets swallowed. A joke dying on someone's lips gets left hanging. Boots stop shifting in the mud. The trench feels sealed in wax, like the world above has pressed pause. You lean forward, straining for the smallest clue about what's happening. Nothing comes. The sound of your own breath starts to annoy you. You try to quiet it down, but that only makes the pounding of your heart louder.
Your ears turn greedy for anything, a single crunch of dirt, the ghost of a whisper, the metallic snap of a rifle bolt being pulled back. You listen, so hard. It feels like your body has wrapped itself around your ears. You squint through the smoke, eyes darting at shapes, shadows, figures that refuse to appear. Every patch of darkness looks alive. You're desperate for noise, but not too much noise, just enough to tell you where the danger is. The longer the silence lasts, the more it eats away at you. Maybe they're crawling forward in the fog. Maybe they're already in position, waiting for the next order. Your imagination doesn't just fill the gap, it races ahead with cruel speed.
It feels strange to admit, but you prefer the shelling. Noise at least is predictable. Noise tells you distance, direction, even timing. Noise can be measured. Silence can mean anything. It stretches out like wire pulled too tight, waiting to snap. When it does, it won't be gentle. Men talk less about this than about lice, mud, food, or rats, but it stays with them longer. The still moments between attacks carry more dread than the attacks themselves. The pause before an ambush is worse than the fight. The gap before the whistle is sharper than the charge. Silence doesn't hold mercy. It holds a blade you can't see. The strangest part is how the quiet plays tricks on your head. You think you hear something. You hold your breath, trying to separate real from imagined. Was that a footstep? A shovel? A cough buried too deep in a scarf? Or was it nothing? Just the throb of your own nerves revving against your skull. You can't tell, and so you wait, coiled tighter, heavy with dread, until time loses shape. Seconds feel like hours, and that weight presses down harder than the shelling ever did. Then, finally, something breaks it. A rifle cracks, or a shell tears the air open again, and the noise feels almost like relief. The sound is violence, but at least it's an answer. It tells you the storm has come. Yet even as the guns return, your body still remembers the pause. Silence lingers, clinging to you like smoke. It's the loudest thing you'll ever hear. And then, only after the noise settles back into its endless rhythm, the post arrives. Letters from home. The paper arrives folded tight, soft at the edges, worn smooth from passing through too many hands. You don't open it right away. You tuck it under your coat, hold it close against your chest, and wait until you can steal a moment alone. There's a ritual to it, a small attempt at control when nothing else belongs to you here. The others tear letters open right in the mud, greedily devouring every word as if it might vanish. Not you. You wait. Maybe you make it until night. Maybe you find 5 quiet minutes when the trench isn't watching. When the candle sputters in its stub of wax, you slide the paper out, thin, smudged, with ink blurred by rain somewhere along the line, but you already know it's the only warmth you'll feel all week. The sentences try to sound cheerful. You can almost picture the effort. Someone adding little details about the weather, about neighbors you barely remembered before this. They describe harvest as if the soil tilled itself, as if the farm isn't crumbling without your hands there to guide it. But you know how to read between the lines. There are missing words, quiet stretches you can hear louder than the ink. When they say, "We're managing," you picture your mother coughing alone in the chair by the hearth. When they sign off with, "Everything's fine," you taste the bitter twist of what they chose not to write. The letters try to protect you, but in the process, they hurt more than they comfort. You want to write back, but what can you actually say? You can't admit the lice crawl under your skin, or that shellfire makes your bones rattle until you ache with fear. You can't tell them about your food turning sour in your hands before you can finish it. Nothing passes the censors unless it's stripped clean, so you invent a version of yourself. Healthy, warm, sometimes laughing, sometimes hopeful, words etched in neat lines so no red pencil scratches them out. And you know, deep down, they're doing the same thing back home. Another layer of lies, wrapped in sentences so thin they bend with the paper.
Some men try writing in code, slipping messages between the lines, a shared memory or a broken phrase only someone at home could understand. But mostly, you fall into the same game everyone else does, hiding what's true in silence. You fold your words down to cliches, to simple reassurances, to promises you're not sure you believe. And all the while, someone in an office scans every curve of your handwriting, making sure nothing seeps through. The letter becomes less about communication and more about survival. It proves you're alive. It proves someone out there still knows your name. Even then, the letters cut both ways. They keep you human. They remind you of voices, of dinners, of smells that don't come from mud and bodies. You read them until the paper softens in your hand, corners melting into fibers, the ink fading under fingertips. But they also sour like spoiled rations. Each word reminds you of what's missing, what you can't touch. The laugh of your brother, the sound of cows braying in the cold morning, the way the floor creaks when someone crosses the home you're meant to be standing in. So you read again. You clutch every line until you've memorized it. And then, when you can't bear the sweetness turning bitter anymore, you pull out the notebook you keep hidden away. Because if letters are where you lie, the journal is where you finally tell the truth.
Doesn't mean safety, and it definitely doesn't mean sleep. Night in the trench isn't rest, it's duty. The order comes down, and you're posted to watch, which sounds simple, until you're the one standing ankle-deep in black water with nothing but a rifle and nerves. The mud is colder now than it was in the day, stiff and tight around your boots, making it feel like shackles locked around your ankles. Your eyes strain against the dark, but it's not the kind of dark you know from home. This one feels alive, crawling and shifting, broken by sudden flashes of light from the occasional flare, blinding you for a second, before dropping you back into blindness. Nothing looks solid in these hours. Every shadow might move. The trench wall at your back feels weak, and everything in front of you could be an enemy waiting. You stand and wait, because that's what you're ordered to do. You adjust your helmet, grip the rifle tighter, whisper curses into the wool of your sleeve, just to hear a voice, even if it's your own. The silence isn't complete. You hear rustling, maybe rats, maybe something worse. The cold slices deeper now that you're still, and your jaw aches from clenching so hard. Shifting your feet isn't an option either. The mud would suck, loud enough to echo, and give you away. So you lock your legs, ignoring the cramps crawling into your thighs. You're not tired, but your body reminds you how long it's been awake anyway. Fear doesn't shout at you in these hours. It whispers. Each small sound presses in like a warning. Was that drip? Water? Or was it a boot heel on the duckboards? Is that breeze nothing? Or the movement of men crawling closer toward the wire? Night raids aren't a rumor here. They are a routine part of the war. Groups sent crawling on their stomachs, slipping across no man's land in silence. Knives loosened, bayonets fixed, testing your line for weakness. That knowledge stains every second of your watch. You're not defending the trench tonight. You're waiting for shadows to choose whether they'll cut it open. And you know men have been snatched like that, in the dark, gone before anyone even found their rifle. You tell yourself to stay sharp, but exhaustion laughs at you. Cold grips your insides, dragging your shoulders down, tempting your eyelids to close. Just for a second, you think. Just 1 second. Then you remember the punishment for sleeping on watch isn't a slap or shouted words. It's death if they catch you. Worse, it's death if the enemy takes advantage of you nodding off. So you push against the wall of the trench, forcing your body upright again, teeth grinding, wrists aching against the wood of your weapon. Time stretches and snaps around you in strange ways. 5 minutes feels like 50. Then suddenly, an hour disappears without warning. You measure the night not by clocks, but by how many flares burst overhead, how many rats skitter past, how many times your fingers go stiff before you rub them awake. And when the horizon finally starts to thin from black to weak gray, there is no relief in it. Sunrise doesn't mean safety here. It just means the waiting shifts back into the endless routine of daylight, hunger, and noise. The night is when the war feels closest, when it breathes down your neck in every shiver. And then, once it finally ends, against all expectation, your body betrays you by closing down anyway. Somehow, eventually, you sleep.
The first sign isn't what you see, it's what you hear. A frantic call, racing down the line, the hiss of the alarm. You don't need anyone to explain what it means. Your body already knows. Gas. The same dread slides into every man around you at the exact same moment. Hands fly to straps. Masks are dragged out of pouches, still slick with mud. You fumble, because everyone fumbles. The leather sticks, the goggles cloud over, and your fingers don't seem fast enough. You're clawing at buckles and tugging too hard on straps, hauling the mask over your face like you're drowning on dry land. The time it takes to seal it feels endless, even though it's only seconds. If you're too slow, seconds are enough to finish you. Once it's on, breathing doesn't feel like safety. It feels like choking through layers of damp flannel. Each breath dragging resistance into your chest. Air slips through filters thick with chemicals that sting your throat worse than cigarette smoke ever could. The goggles fog instantly, turning the world into shapes and shadows. Your voice doesn't sound like your own anymore. Muffled, buried. The mask isn't just blocking poison from coming in, it's cutting you off from the rest of the living. You hear shouting, but have no idea what's being said. The edges of your vision blur with condensation. The thought drills in fast. Yes, the mask is working, but it's a coffin you have to wear to survive. It's not the claustrophobia that stays with you most, it's what you've seen happen to the unlucky. The mask only protects you because you got it on in time. Not everyone does. You've watched comrades stumble, clutching at their throats, eyes streaming, coughing foam, while their voices shatter into high-pitched screams. You've seen skin burned raw, where the gas reached through torn fabric. There's no romance in those deaths, no bravery, no final gesture, just suffering. Men collapse in the mud, clawing desperately at air that won't come, writhing like the very earth is crushing them. Hours later, if they survive that long, they're left blind, lungs scarred, voices shredded into whispers. Some stay alive for weeks, but never really live again. You learn to keep the mask within reach, almost as close as the rifle. It doesn't matter if it squeezes your face, cuts into your nose, or fills with the stink of your own sweat. It's your only barrier against an invisible killer that slips over the ground like a second skin. Gas doesn't care about trenches. It drifts in low, crawls into every crevice, sinks into the mud, waiting for you to be careless. The mask makes you feel trapped, but the alternative is worse. A sans-sur, After each attack, when the masks finally come off, the relief is poisoned by dread. You gulp air that feels fresher than water, but the taste of chemicals lingers, caught in the back of your tongue. You tell yourself you're fine, yet you keep coughing. The fear doesn't retreat either. It waits in the pit of your stomach, because you know the canisters will be fired again. All you can do is keep reaching for the mask and pray your straps hold. A sansur nol bito. It's a prison, yes, but it's a prison you thank every single time you breathe and feel the air still moving inside your chest. Without it, there's no story left to tell. The mask may keep you alive, but the place that surrounds you, mud walls, wooden planks, filth, reminds you daily that this trench is the real cage. This is where you live. You don't call it fear. Nobody does. Saying the word sounds weak, and weakness isn't something you let slip in front of the others. Instead, you hide it under new names. You tell yourself you're tired. You tell yourself you're cold or hungry or distracted, anything but fear. But deep down, you know that's exactly what it is. Raking your nerves from the moment you open your eyes to the second you force them shut again. It's not terror in the way people back home imagine, with screaming or running. It's flatter than that. It hangs on you like the uniform itself, always there, always pressing. After a while, you stop feeling much of anything anyway. There's the cold in your hands and feet, sure, but everything else goes numb. That's the only way you keep going. If you let yourself really feel every sound, every smell, every taste of the mud, you'd snap in half before tomorrow. So you drift, a kind of dullness sliding into place. You walk, you eat what passes for food, you sit your shift, you scratch at lice, but you move through it like you aren't completely inside your own skin. Some men call it focus. Others don't call it anything. The truth is, it's just another way of letting your mind shut off before your stomach flips with panic. The strange part is, it's not dying that unsettles you. Everyone here has already made peace with death in some fashion. It's the idea of what happens before that. The fear is of being hit and left alive long enough to know what's happening. The idea of bleeding out in the mud while no one has time to stop. The idea of being carried back, staring at your own legs, twisted wrong, begging someone with morphine to come faster. Death is a full stop. Pain is the long crawl before it. That's what you dread. That's what you keep tucked behind your clenched jaw when your hands shake in silence. You've seen men break under it. Not once, not twice, but more times than you'll admit in letters. A soldier clutches his stomach, blood running hot onto the duckboards, and he looks not at his wound, but at you. He doesn't ask to be saved. He asks to be ended. And you can't forget it, the rasp of him begging, in a voice already thinning, the way his hand gropes for your rifle, like he wants to finish it himself. You tell yourself you'd never do that, you'd never ask for it, but the thought wedges in your brain like shrapnel. You hope you won't reach that place, and at the same time, you understand why he did. To cope, you end up splitting yourself in two. One part of you sits in the mud, holding the rifle, watching the wire. The other steps outside, floating just enough to get through another day. That gap, that splitting, might be the only thing keeping you alive. If you stayed fully present, if you let every sensation hammer in full, you'd collapse before the next shell even landed. The numbness feels strange, but it's a shield, thin as paper and just as fragile. And yet, fear has its uses. It sharpens in odd moments. It keeps you awake when your knees are buckling. It sends your hands fumbling for your mask before the first mist of gas ever touches your skin. It drags you into cover a second before the air rips apart in front of you. Fear whispers ugly things, but it also whispers survival. You don't admit it to anyone, but you live on it as much as on rations. The cruelest part? You can't share it. You laugh with the others, you curse, you chew, you rest against the wall, all while the fear sits like a stone in your gut. You don't pour it onto paper, not in letters, not even in the journal. You carry it, quietly, wearing it as if it's another layer of uniform. And even then, it's not the hardest burden to hold, because here, strangely enough, what destroys you fastest isn't the fear, it's the hope.
The war doesn't end with a crash, or a roar, or some grand flourish. It ends the same way most days in the trench begin, with a sound that isn't there. One morning you wake and notice the air feels too still. The guns that shook the dirt loose from the trench walls aren't firing. The ground doesn't rattle beneath your boots. Men glance at each other, waiting for the next shell that never falls. You don't cheer, you don't throw your helmet in the air. You just stand there, in the damp fog, confused by the sudden absence. The war hasn't ended. It is simply stopped. You expect relief, something that lets your shoulders drop for the first time in years. It doesn't come. What actually settles over you feels like nothing. The absence of noise doesn't bring peace. It just leaves you hollow. You've been wound tight for so long that you don't know what to do when the cord is cut. Your body doesn't trust the silence, and neither does your mind. You stand waiting for the mistake, the last blast, the shouted order telling you to move forward once more. But nothing comes. The waiting continues, only now it has no clear reason. The trench itself doesn't change. The mud still drags at your boots. The waterlogged walls still weep. The stench of rot doesn't thin out just because the guns have gone quiet. You scrape lice eggs from the seams of your uniform that same morning, same as yesterday. The rats still skitter across the duckboards in broad daylight, fat and bold. Nothing about the daily misery shifts when the armistice is signed, hundreds of miles away. The war might be over by ink and paper, but in the trench, everything that marked it continues. The earth doesn't recognize treaties. What surprises you is how empty men look. You glance around at faces and see not joy, not pride, just blankness. Eyes that held terror one night and exhaustion the next, now hold little at all. It's no accident. Many wrote later that when the quiet settled in, they didn't feel triumph, they felt numb. They had been tied to the rhythm of shells for so long that life without it had no meaning. Soldiers stood frozen, lost, as though peace itself was harder to endure than war. When you've lived in constant alarm, stillness is not comfort. It's another kind of wound. You thought you would have words for this moment, that you'd be able to explain what it meant to survive. Instead, you find yourself staring at nothing, muttering half-sentences that trail off. The end of the war is the only thing you can't put into words. How do you describe silence when it's heavier than any explosion? How do you name a feeling that's less about joy and more about confusion? All you know for certain is that the future has cracked open, and you have no idea what waits inside it. So you continue standing a revans, which is when either no one. So you remembers of no, you look once about this. It's as bad. So you continue standing a war, then it waits inside it, and you have anything wait out. So you continue standing a revans, which is when news, you live. Sigils. So when news stills. So you continue standing where you are, boots in the same mud, eyes scanning the same jagged horizon. The war has stopped, but it doesn't feel finished. The fighting is over, yet nothing around you looks different. The end isn't the relief you imagined. It's just another beginning, one you don't yet understand. And when the mud finally dries, when the uniforms peel away, when the rifles are stacked and left to rust, the thing that refuses to vanish is the memory. You won't be remembered by name. No books, no statues, no speeches whispered over stone. But you were here. Every shiver in the trench, every bite of bread too hard to chew, every cigarette lit just to numb hunger. That was your war. You won't be carved into marble, yet the war lived through you. So the next time you hear about the Great War, don't think only of generals and treaties. Think of the forgotten soldier. History isn't just plans and dates. It's the weight of a wet uniform, the taste of stale bread, the sound of rats in the dark.